Welcome back, everyone, to Talking Devils podcast, brought to you by talkingdevils.co.uk, your number one independent Manchester United podcast. This is our Wednesday night podcast. Usually now we'll be talking the Ralph Rangnick tactics, we talk about games, etc. But tonight we're taking a much different approach here. As always, joined by Markus Neumayr. We're going to talk everything Manchester United. We're going to talk about Marcus's time at Manchester United. We're going to talk about Sir Alex, Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, memorable games that Marcus was part of at Manchester United. So we have a lot of interest in talking points here tonight. And also towards the end of the podcast, we will also be reviewing the Burnley game as well last night. So if you do have any questions, any comments in from Marcus, do drop into the comments, do smash like the video, continue to show support for our Talk Devils podcast. First of all, Marcus, haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. Been a very busy time for both of us. First of all, how are you? And thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Keane. Thank you for having me again. Yeah, as you said, I'm quite busy. I got into my coaching role a few months ago, and there's a lot of stuff to do. As for COVID, there are a lot of regulations and things to do beside football. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, but I don't want to complain. I'm doing the best job in what I could do, So I'm happy with it, and I love being with my kids and with my players, and it's a really good time.
Yeah, that's absolutely bang on. And look, I suppose when you're doing something you love and you're doing that every day consistently, life is good, regardless of COVID.
Definitely. Every day you're on the pitch and you can touch the ball is a good day, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I absolutely agree with that. Tonight, Marcus, we're going to talk about more. Usually we talk about all things Man United. We talk about latest news, transfer news. We delve into tactics. Now, we will do that towards the end of the show, but tonight, Marcus, I wanted to deep dive into more about your time at United, because you moved from Eintracht Frankfurt, a very brilliant team in Germany, to Manchester United in 2003. Obviously, that was a massive move for yourself, come from Germany over to the biggest club in England. For you, Marcus, how did that move come about, and kind of what was your initial thoughts when the biggest club in England, not even England, but the world, were coming in for you and they wanted to sign you?
Yeah, it was really special. At that time, I had a really good period regarding my football time. I was playing for Eintracht Frankfurt, the under 19s. I was playing for the national team in Germany, the under 17s, under 18s it was at that time, I guess. And I had a lot of clubs looking after me, talking to me, and I had a lot of offers on the table, which I didn't even consider at that time, because for me, Eintracht Frankfurt was the right place to be. But then when United knocked on the door, I was really curious, and they didn't make an offer. So they wanted to have me over for a trial. So I thought, okay, it's even more interesting, because then you can see what you get. And I went over there, had 1 week of training in Carrington, and I was in a different world, At that time, Carrington was the state-of-the-art training complex in the world, I think, in 2003, and I've never seen anything like it. So for me, it was like, walking into Disneyland. So I really loved it, and it was just amazing, just being around with the likes of Giggs, Scholes. Beckham was still there at that time. Ruud van Nistelrooy. I couldn't believe it, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I was really happy. Not even thinking about if they make an offer for me or not. Just being there felt right, And at the end of the day, when they made the offer for me, there was no way for me going to another club, because at that time United was my favorite team. I watched them every Monday with the highlights of the weekend, and it was there was something special about the club. And when I was there in Carrington, I felt it even more. So I really didn't have 1 second of a doubt what I had to do. And when I signed my first professional contract then in 2003, when I turned 17, I think it was one of the best days in my life. And then when I went over, it was not that easy, obviously, as leaving a family for the first time, even into a different country, to different culture. It's not the easiest way to do, right? So I had time. I needed time to adapt. My first tournament with the Milk Cup, we've won it straight away in Northern Ireland. It was the first time we've won it since the likes of Keane, Scholes, Beckham and Bots did that 15 years before. So it was we had a really good start, and I felt really good at that time. And after a few weeks and months, it took me some time to settle in, even with the language. You know, when you learn English at school, it's quite different when you go to talk to a Mancunian. You know, it's a little bit different. So I
Definitely.
need a little bit of time to get started with that one. But I mean, the people over there, they were amazing. You know, they helped me out, and they were straightforward. I learned to love the culture over there, and I really miss it because people in England, they have something special about them. You know, we here in Europe, we more, how should I say, we're more structured and more settled back as a character, and I love that honesty and that straight into your face character in England or in Ireland, and it's something I'm missing even now. Yeah.
You mentioned that like sometimes it's hard to grasp the Mancunian accent. I have friends in Manchester. I travel over back from matches like every month, and sometimes I don't understand. And I'm from Ireland. I
Exactly.
sometimes I don't
Well,
understand.
imagine how it feels like when you come as a 17 young kid after 4 years of English lessons, and then you come over to Manchester, and it's like a complete new language.
Yeah, it's like a whole different world. With
Yeah.
regards to that, Wayne actually has a question. We're actually with regards to that, Marcus. So when you joined Manchester United, you're obviously bringing in a lot of players from Europe for the first time in terms of their youth academy structure. So they brought in like say Gerard Pique, Giuseppe Rossi, and etc.
Yeah.
Was it difficult for you at that time? Obviously, being 17, coming into a young, I suppose, coming into a different culture in England, in Manchester. Obviously, come to Carrington Training Ground. You're being around all these other young players at the time who were all kind of adapting to that culture at the same time. Was that difficult for you at the time to kind of to learn that kind of adapt to the culture, but also kind of have that language barrier at the same time?
Of course, it was difficult, but it was a task for us. Besides the football task we had as professional footballers for the first time in our lives, but we had a teacher who gave us every week 2 lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we had to work our way into it. You know, it's normal when you go into a different country. You have to understand the language. You have to talk the language. You have to understand the culture, and you have to respect the culture. That's the thing. The first thing I learned when I went over there, and obviously it took us some time. Like for Gerard or Jerry, for me, for Giuseppe. Of course, it wasn't that easy, but that also made that bond between us so strong, and because we were helping each other out, and you also felt that on the pitch that we had a special group with foreigners, and we were basically dying for each other on the field, and you felt that, and that was why we were so successful at that time. And it's not always good that you have a translator and everything is easy for you. Sometimes it's also good to make you work, and to push that barrier away, because you have to adapt to the country. There's no other choice to that, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And like, look, I suppose for any young player, like going to a different country, whether it's England, Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, wherever it may be, and you're coming from a different culture, and as you said, you're like 17 years of age. It's gonna be hard for anyone. Like, regardless of you are in English in school for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, that obviously will be hard because you're adapting to a new culture, new setup, new city, new house, all these different types of things. And then there's the football. Then you have that.
Exactly.
So, like for that, it's going to be hard for anyone. But look, it's kind of good in the way at your time that you had players like Gerard Pique, Giuseppe Rossi, players who were in the same situation. So, like, I suppose you could probably kind of bounce off each other like that, to kind of get yourselves through it as a group.
Exactly, you push each other, and every time somebody was down or was struggling, the other two were there and were supporting him. You know, so and that's also friendship that is very deep, and it's up till today. You know, we're still talking today, and it's like we've never been away from each other. It was really a special time because for all of us, it was the first time away from our friends, from our family in a different country, and that pushes you together. And on the pitch, it wasn't that it wasn't a big deal, because on football, you don't need to talk a lot. Everywhere in the world, when you go and play football, it's the same. And we really enjoyed that at that time. And you saw that also on the pitch, that we had this passion, this fun, and also this different approach to it than the English lads, And this was also what always made United special, because it was not only the English players who created that big clubs, it was even the foreigners. But the foreigners adapted all really well, because the English people, or even the Irish people, they felt everybody welcome so easy. You made everybody welcome, and that was so good, and therefore United was unique in that way.
Yeah, and that's why United are the biggest club in the world, is because of the history, the culture, and how they have that. And there's always kind of that
All these
not
different
something
influences. Yeah, exactly.
influences.
Exactly.
You have kind of that close knit kind of culture, and
Yeah.
especially at your time, the football club, like Sir Alex was ruling the club with an iron fist, but also
Yeah.
he had characters in the dressing room who would lead by example. And I think that's probably
Yeah,
when you're
even
at
at that time, Carlos Queiroz was there, and he gave also his different approach to football, to English football, because he had more tactical point of view football. He was
yeah.
not the English hard rock and roll football. It was more the tactical Portuguese style of football. And therefore everybody could learn from Sir Alex, from Carlos Queiroz, from Mick Phelan. After there was Rennie Mullenstein, he also had his special approach to football. He come from the football total, from Holland. So all these different influences, they create a big thing, and that was the point that made United so special all these years, because it wasn't just a product of English or Irish players that are the best players that you put together. It was always a product of whole Europe, and that's what I loved about the club, because they were so open-minded, and they always gave you a platform for your own ideas, for your own culture, for your own well-being, and that was so important for me and also for the other players, and that's why we settled in so well.
In terms of that, like you obviously said, you had a lot of influences from like a coaching standpoint. You mentioned Sir Alex, Rennie Mullenstein, Carlos Queiroz, Mike Phelan, people like that.
Yeah.
You're obviously being a young attacking midfield player around that time, and you're obviously at a football club where we had a riches of midfield players. There was such as Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, Darren Fletcher. There's like that who were all in and around the club at the same time as you. As a young midfielder at Man United at that time, who was your kind of biggest influence as a teammate in terms of a midfield player?
I always admired Scholes a lot, and he was also the one. He didn't talk a lot, but when he said something, it was always on point. And I really enjoyed being around him, watching him. I admired the way he was seeing, playing, and feeling football, because he always took the right decisions. There are a lot of great players out there, but there are not many who always take the right decisions. It's football is a decision making game. The team or the players who make the better decisions on the field, more or less they're gonna win, because mistakes, they cost you. And Scholes was one of them. He nearly made any mistakes, nearly none. And even when he was with his body back to the game, he knew exactly what he had to do. He knew where everybody was on the pitch, and this was amazing. I was amazed by this, because I was training alongside him, and I couldn't believe how good this young kid was, because if you see him from his statue and from his body, yeah, you don't give it to him. But when you see him having the ball and you see the things he was creating with it, yeah, it was out of this world, basically. I never saw anything like it before and after. So I really have to say, it was, for me, he was the one guy I was looking up to. Kino was there. For me, it was not always that easy to understand him, because he has this very special approach of communicating and talking to people. And for young players, it can be very frightening. And I think especially me and Jerry and Giuseppe, we never felt comfortable around him. Even when he came into the second team, yeah, he was always putting himself into a position where you couldn't talk to him, or where you couldn't be friends with him. He made you feel like you're way off him, and that's not a good feeling for a young guy who plays with a first team player. If you talk about Ole, or if you talk about Fletch, or if you talk Scholesy, if they came down to train with us, or Quinton Fortune, they were completely different. They were open-minded. They gave us a hand. They gave us feedback. It was a complete different story. So I would say it was definitely Scholesy.
Yeah, like maybe it's an Irish thing, I don't know, but Roy Keane sometimes.
Maybe. I don't know.
Sometimes Irish people can have a blunt approach to not just football, but to life in general. But yeah, look, Keane was one of them, weren't he?
In a very strange way. I never saw it after with a different player. It was not like we felt that he didn't have bad intentions. He didn't want you to do bad, but his way of communicating and the way he make you feel, it was really strange.
Yeah, maybe he was just like trying to push everybody, probably just trying to, give him that kind of.
Exactly. But at that time, as a 17, 18-year-old kid, I didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like anyone. Like, I think a young player looking at Roy Keane at that age, you're probably scared shitless. Like, it's probably just one of them.
Yeah, it was a little bit a mix of everything. It was not only scary, it was not only frightening, but it was also a little bit of respect, and also a little bit of not liking him. Even though you have a lot of respect for this guy, but it was a strange. As I told you, it was a strange feeling about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think for me, like, from hearing a lot from what I've heard from like the Ireland camps, like in terms of when he was on international duty, he kind of had that same aura in the Ireland team too, in terms of leading by example. Sometimes not always the most approachable player, but always someone who tried to kind of like lead by example and demand the best standards. I think that's the thing about Roy Keane. Like, he was always someone who demanded the best standard, demanded that everyone put in 110% at all times, whether it's training or a game.
Exactly, and I think as a player, people, they let you more. They as a coach, you always have to lead other people. You have to lead other human beings. But as a player, as long as you have your performance and you're a good player, they respect you, and there's no big deal about it. But that's why I think Kino, as a coach, he's struggling, because he has his own way of supporting and leading other human beings, and being a coach is nothing else than leading other human beings, I think, in my point of view. Because if you don't have the players behind you, or if you don't support them, then it will be very difficult. And therefore, I think as a coach, he never had success because of that reason.
Yeah, and like, I think, look, at Sunderland, yes, he done well to get him out of the Championship. He done well to keep him up in the Premier League. But after that, when you look at his time at Ipswich, didn't work out.
Yeah.
Assistant coach at Villa, didn't really work out. Now, I'll be honest, his time at Ireland, he done very well. He done very well to get us to the European Championships with Martin O'Neill, and done very well. Now, towards the end of his time at Ireland, he did fall out with a couple of players. But I'll be honest, I'll be with Kino. I'll be with Kino on this one. A couple of players he did fall out with, for me, weren't good enough to put on the Irish shirt, but that's another story for another day. But like, in terms of that, like, I think for the large part, maybe his approach from probably a man management standpoint in today's game probably won't work. But like, he's looks like he could be going to Sunderland as his next job. Let's see what happens there, because he done well in his first spell there, but now this is a different story. It's League One. There's different circumstances at that football club compared to 10 years ago. So look, let's see what happens to him. Very interested, as you said, interested to see if his style of coaching can rub off on these players now when he goes to Sunderland, and potentially goes to Sunderland. And look, it'd be interesting to see if he can kind of reinvigorate himself, maybe reinvent himself as a coach, and maybe learn from
you never know
experiences.
He seems more sympathetic even as a Sky Sports TV expert, so maybe he will he worked his way up as being in
and do you think he brings Micah Richards with him as his
exactly. He gets the best out of him, so maybe you should take him as an assistant coach.
100%. That would be, I'll tell you one thing. Remember the Sunderland documentary on Netflix? If he brings Micah Richards with him, if he brings Micah Richards with him, I'm subscribing
Yeah,
100%.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Um, but on the note of obviously your time at United and your time kind of playing with the youth players, and you're with the likes of a very successful youth team and reserve team with the likes of Giuseppe Rossi, Gerard Pique, players like that.
Yeah.
In terms of your time at United, in terms of adapting to English culture and the English game, kind of once you kind of got over the language barrier and once you got to know your teammates and obviously playing with like Scholesy and that in training, when you started playing your first couple of games to United and you got used to the culture, how did you find your initial kind of start in the English game and kind of dealing with kind of the pace and the intensity of the English game? Kind of how did you take that initially?
For me, it was a special approach. When I started really well, and then I got my first big injury. I dislocated my collarbone here,
Yeah,
and I was out for 6 to 9 months. And when I came back, I was already in the middle of the second year. So my second year wasn't that really good because I came back from my first big injury. And when I started to do really well was in my third year. I have to say, adapted to the lifestyle, adapted to the football, I adapted to the intensity, and I found my way to play in that physical English football style, and therefore I was really disappointed when I didn't get the chance in the end from Sir Alex to maybe even make a pre-season for the first team, because in my last year I was training with the first team, and I think I did really well. People like Ole, like Quinton Fortune, who were close to me, they always came to me, or even Ruth, and they told me I did really well, and I really did a good job even in the training. So, and for the reserves, I was the captain. Rennie Mullenstein gave me a big responsibility. I really took it by heart. So I did really care about the boys and the team, and I think you could see that even on the pitch. We had a really good approach to each other. We were a big team. Nobody was jealous about the other player when he was playing before him, which is not always normal in football. And in my third year, I think I really lived up to the expectations and to the style of English football. And sometimes in football there are decisions which are not necessarily always right. Even Sir Alex didn't do everything really good. I mean, with Jerry, with Pique, he led one of the best defenders in history go back to Barcelona for the same amount of money. It's sometimes you are in a situation which is not very fortunate. I was there at a time, as you said, where a lot of midfielders were in my position, a lot of good players with quality and with experience, and it was really difficult for me to break through. And that time I also didn't feel like going on loan and then coming back after 1 year will bring me into a different position, because I was really disappointed at that moment when Sir Alex denied me to go with the first team into the pre-season, because basically I was really I thought this is going to happen, because after my last year I think I did a good job, and this decision was really hard for me, and it took me some time to get over it, because as a young kid I was still 19 there, 19, 20. Until that point everything went into my direction. This was the first point in my life where I was going to the crossroads. You could move in one direction or in the other one, and unfortunately I took the wrong one for some years. And that's also part of football. Sometimes you make bad decisions, but you know it only afterwards. At that time, it was a really, really bad decision for me to go back to Germany. I should have stayed in England, because I thought my style and the way I was playing was really admired by a lot of people there. And but that's football. As I said, we don't have a time machine. If we would have one, then my decisions would have been different.
and do you think maybe towards that time, you say you didn't want to go on loan. Do you maybe
Yeah.
think now in reflection, maybe you should maybe have taken a loan to like maybe another team in maybe the Premier League or the Championship or somewhere like that to kind of further
Yeah.
your development in English football?
Yeah, at that time, Sutherland and Southampton, they were both interested in me, and they both wanted to take me on a permanent deal. And but my agent at that time, he was really keen on me to go back to Germany and fight my way back there. And yeah, as I said, sometimes you take the wrong decisions, and and being on loan. I mean, I saw that at that time a lot of United players were on loan to Belgium, into the Belgium league, and they necessarily didn't do well. If I think about Fox or Colin Heath, at the end they didn't get their chance in the first team, and at that time I felt like this is not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and like, look, I think in reflection, sometimes you make that right decision at that time, and at the time it's right, 100%, and then maybe
Yeah,
hindsight's a beautiful thing. Like we all know that, like, hindsight is a beautiful thing, but it's good. Like, and Reese says it here in the comments that it's good to have that perspective, that you can always think about what decision you would have made at that time, and look, maybe it's a case, that things happen for a reason, and I think that's
definitely. Yeah,
a
definitely.
massive thing in life.
Even the bad times are good for you. After that, I had 3-4 years where I didn't, reach my level. I didn't get, I couldn't play up to my expectations I had for myself. I worked really hard also on the mental side of the game at that time, because I felt like I have to do something. Otherwise, it's going to be over soon. I really felt that with 22, 23, when you have that price tag and that United tag above you, and you're playing in the second or third division in Germany, and everybody expects you to be the new Ronaldo. And in the end, you have a lot of pressure on yourself, and you cannot perform. And I really had to find a way to work on myself, to work on my mind, to get back that easiness, not that these expectations put you down to the ground. And with 34, 30, 35, I got back to the level I was useful myself. And then my career got back up until 33, 34. I made a move out of Switzerland with 31 to a good side in Turkey for a lot of money. And this is not very easy at that time, because basically when you're over 27, 28, it's very difficult to make a move into a good league for good money. And but as I said, you sometimes you don't even have to learn about the good things. Sometimes you also have to learn about the bad things, and the decisions are there to be made. And with the knowledge of today, I would have done differently. But that's football and that's life, But the most important thing is to get on with your decisions, and don't think about it too much, because you lose energy, you lose time, and the only thing you can influence is the future and the real moment you are in now. And don't think about too much what's behind you, because you cannot influence anymore. And I took some years really to figure that out. And when I was figuring out, my performance and my head was where it had to be.
Yeah, and look, I think, again, as a young player, you make decisions that you think that's best for you. Your agent makes decision. Well,
Yeah, you have
advise you
people
to make
around
a
you who tell
decision.
you what to do. Agents, family, friends. They all take part in your decisions. It is like this
How
in
modern
football.
football works,
Yeah,
100%. Just touching a bit on your time at the club, like you've played obviously in the Milk Cup and stuff like that. That's well renowned over in the UK and Ireland as a massive cup for kind of young players.
yeah.
When you were playing your time throughout the youth and reserve team, you've obviously played against a lot of teams in England. In particular, who was the toughest team you played against in England during your time at United?
Yeah, I have to say the City team. The derby was always really special against City. I think we hammered them a lot of times, but it was really a hard fight against them, because you felt there was something special about it. And there was even Schmeichel was playing for them. I remember when he was at City at that time, and they were always pretty tough games. But at that time for United, I think there were no youth teams even close to our level, because we were so talented and ambitious. It was really difficult. So there were not many sides who were playing on our level, and but City was close to that, I would say.
What were Liverpool like at that level? Like, obviously that's
They,
still a
they
massive
weren't good.
rivalry too.
They weren't good. They didn't have the standards. They didn't have the technical standard at that time. They didn't have the aggressiveness. Tactically, they weren't that good. So I would no. Middlesbrough was quite good at that time, I remember. but that's also 20 years ago, So I think that must
They're
have
very
changed.
good the other night as well, but we won't talk about that.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like look, I suppose like when you look at the standard, like City's youth teams around that time, obviously they had the likes of Mika Richards and
Yeah.
players like that, who were
Yeah.
coming through.
Kasper
Their
Schmeichel
academies,
was there as well. Yeah.
yeah, Casper, as he said, Casper Schmeichel,
Yeah. No, he
players like
wasn't
that.
there.
Yeah. Well, Peter was there too, but Casper was also there. But
Yeah.
yeah, Casper Schmeichel was there. They had Michael Johnson as well. He was a good young player in around there. I think he was probably just after you, but he was one of the
Yeah,
good
but
young.
we had an amazing team with Gerard Pique, Johnny Evans, Ryan Shawcross, Fraser Campbell, Chris Eagles. I mean, there was no way that they were even getting close to us, So we were really brilliant at that time.
Yeah, and like you look at some of them players now, Shawcross, Evans,
Yeah,
PK. All
yeah.
these players have had very good if
Yeah,
talking about
Danny Simpson also, the right
defenders.
back, was also in that team. Yeah, he also got British. He won the Premier League with Leicester City. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Danny Simpson. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like there's a lot of good, great players came from that squad, and
Paul
like
McShane was also in our team, the crazy
yeah,
Irish redhead.
yeah, absolutely.
Good guy,
McShane.
good guy. I loved
Yeah,
him. He
good
was
guy. And do you
really
know what? He's in
funny guy.
terms of like Irish defenders, like he was literally no nonsense.
Yeah,
He was
no,
a
he wasn't. He wasn't. He was going through the wall if you asked him to. He was amazing.
yeah. I know from watching him as time at Ireland because I didn't get to see him obviously at United. I was only young at the time,
Yeah,
but watching him play for Ireland under Giovanni Trapattoni, as part of that team we had,
yeah,
he was very good defender, very no nonsense. The only one thing I always it gives me nightmares is when Thierry Henry handballed it against us and Paul McShane was trying to get at him and Henry handballed it twice and France scored and we didn't make the World Cup. But that's
yeah,
one of my synonymous memories of Paul McShane. Seeing
yeah,
him
yeah.
facing Thierry Henry cheating. But again, I'm not going to get into that because that still upsets me. 15 years later,
I
that's
can
still
imagine.
really upsetting
I
me
can
now.
imagine.
But like in terms of like you've obviously played with a lot of great players, and you've mentioned me before kind of about your relationship with Gerard Pique. Obviously, like look, he's someone who's done fantastically well at
Yeah.
Barcelona and obviously internationally with Spain as well. In terms of like your relationship with him, like is he one of them players now that you've kind of you're always close to even after your time at Man United?
Yeah, we were always close. I mean, we were living together. We were sharing digs, with our guest parents, and we were always close. We always had a good time. We shared basically everything, and we really, we were there for each other. That when somebody wasn't good, the other one lifted him up. There was times we were playing in the streets at 1, 2 o'clock at night in Sale, one against one. These things, they are always there. And we always said, no matter what career the other one makes, we are there for each other. And until today, it's been this way. So I cannot even say bad word about him because he's such a great person. He's such a great father and one of the best central defenders we had on this planet. So I think there's nothing more to say about him.
Yeah, and like it's such a shame because it must have been so tough because he came through United at a time where Rio and Vidic were so good, and he didn't get that chance like to
Yeah,
to play. And like as we said, hindsight's a beautiful thing. But imagine if Sir Alex changed the three centre backs and you put Pique into the fold there, and you put Pique, Rio, Vidic. Let's say if you wanted to adapt your system, three at the back wasn't really big back then, but
Yeah, but that's what I said. Sometimes even Sir Alex made a mistake in his decisions. And that's football also. But maybe for Gerard, it was the right time to go back where he was grown up. He had a good moment when Guardiola took him back. He was believing in young players that didn't have a lot of money to spend. And then at that time, there were three big injuries with Puyol, with Milito, and with Marquez.
Marquez, yeah.
And he grabbed his chance, So that's also football, and you have to be there at the right time and at the right time of the moment. And he was there, and there's no bad feeling about it. He made a great career, and he's still playing, and everybody who sees him it's a big admiration.
Yeah, and it's mad. I'd love to ask, like, what was it like? Joe, you've just moved from United a year and a half later. You're playing against him in the Champions League final and you beat him. Like, that
Yeah.
must have been surreal for him at that time, because like you moved from, you obviously, you went to United. That was great for your development, and you went back to your boyhood team and you beat your former club in the
Yeah,
Champions League
and
final.
he also had bad feelings about United. I mean, he will never say it, but he was really disappointed that he never got the chance of Sir Alex, and it's normal because as a young guy, when you get brought into United and they build you up for 2 3 years and you don't get a run for at least 10 15 games in a row and you cannot show what you can do, of course you're upset. I don't think he will be really bad with Sir Alex, but in the end of the day, he was upset that he didn't get that chance because he loved his life over there in England.
Yeah, and look, again, it's one of these things where it doesn't happen only at United, but other clubs where it doesn't work out, but then you go elsewhere and you make a big career. Like, look, we've seen, like, even the likes of Iran go to United and didn't do well there, but then thrives elsewhere. We've seen that for
Yeah,
many
yeah,
different players.
yeah, yeah,
So, like, again, it's one of these things where things happen for a reason, and I think that did happen for a reason with PK. But look,
exactly.
he can't complain. He's had a massive career at Barcelona and still doing it now. So, like, look,
Yeah,
he's doing fantastically well at the moment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true.
100%. Marcus, with relation to, I suppose, Sir Alex, you've
Yeah.
obviously had many different encounters with Sir Alex coming through the football club. Just talk to us a bit, just about your relationship with him in terms of when you were coming through United. What was your relationship like with Sir Alex? What were, like, your engagements like with him?
The relation with Sir Alex was very, yeah, I wouldn't say basic, but yeah, he was always close to us. He knew what was going on. He was always there in the reserve games. He watched our games. He gave us a feedback every now and then in the trainings. He didn't give us a lot of attention, which is normal as a young player, because he has to take care of the big players and he has to look after his team. He's putting in at the weekends, but yeah, he made you felt that he knows what's going on. I think that's the right thing to say. He always knew what you were doing. He knew if you've been around the corner, if you knew you were out. If I was out with Jerry, he knew it. He made us feel that he knew. He one and there. He left a sentence between from the changing room to the restaurant, So he always made us feel that he's in control of everything.
Yeah, and like, he just ruled with an iron fist. And I've talked to a few former United players, and the one thing that they all always say about him is he always knew where you were, he knew what you're doing, and he had eyes everywhere. Like Sir
Yeah,
Alex, you couldn't go
exactly.
anywhere, or Sir Alex wouldn't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just one of them things. But in terms of, like, when you move from United, and you've had a career in Germany, Switzerland, Turkey, places like that. In terms of your retirement then from the game, you've moved into punditry, and you're also coaching as well. But you've moved into the punditry side of the game. You cover Europa League and Europa Conference League games. What's that like in terms of, you've coached, you've played? What's it like being a pundit?
Yeah, it's really cool because it's not that much different than being a footballer or being a coach. It's about the football game, and if you analyze a team or if you analyze the way one team is playing and why they are playing good or why they are playing bad, it's the same thing you do as a coach. So for me, it's also a good way to learn more about the game from a different point of view, and that's why I'm doing it, because I want to get better in what I'm doing. And as a TV pundit, you're talking about strength, you talk about weaknesses, about the team, and therefore you need to analyze what's wrong, what's going good, what is going good, what is not going good, and therefore you need to reflect yourself, you need to reflect the game, you need to reflect your own approach of being a coach. And these are good things which make you better, because these are processes. This is a process that helps you in growing being a coach, or in growing being a TV pundit.
Yeah, and like, I've seen a lot of former players go into punditry, and it's like the transformation from going from like the pitch to a coaching role into the pundits table, I'd say it's just the same amount of pressure than preparing for like you're prepping a team talk.
Exactly.
It's kind of the same
Exactly.
thing. Like you have to prepare to analyze certain parts of the game, and you have
Yeah.
to like obviously do your research on certain players and
Exactly.
teams
Yeah.
form and stuff like that.
Yeah. You watch statistics, you watch analyses, you watch performances, you watch everything. And therefore you get a clear idea of why things go good or why things go bad. Yeah. Quite easy.
Yeah, and look, it's one thing I always enjoy. I my girlfriend kills me because I always love watching the coverage before the actual game. Like I
Yeah,
like watching
of
Monday Night
course. It's
Football.
really interesting. Yeah. I understand you. Yeah.
BT Sport. I like getting that insight. Like listening to Gary
Yeah.
Neville's, Jamie, even though he's a Liverpool man, Jamie Carragher.
Yeah.
People like that? I like watching that type of stuff because
Yeah.
it's great to get that insight. It's kind of players who've played the game. Do you know what I mean? It's always great to get the
Watch it
insight.
from a different perspective. Yeah, you get a different point of view, and you get inside information which a normal guy who watches football would never think about. And that's why a lot of broadcasts, TV shows, or whatever you call them, they always take former football players because they know how the game works, they know why it works this way, and it's a different point of view. And this is why football is so interesting.
Yeah, and like, do you look at maybe the likes of Jamie Carragher and Neville, their relationship kind of on Monday Night Football? Like, it's always great to watch, and I know they slag each other back and forth, but like, it's always good to watch that as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's also, it's a fun thing, and I think when you watch football, you always want to have a little bit of that comedy stuff, and Gus is a good guy for that.
Yeah, 100%. Gary Neville has his hand in everywhere. Commentary, pundits. He owns
Yeah,
Hotel Football, Salford City. Gary Neville is literally everywhere at the moment. He's like
yeah. He's like on
as
the pitch. He's not good at anything special, but he's everywhere. It's like being on the pitch, right?
yeah, and he's like, what did someone say about him before? Gary Neville, he's like a busy bee. He's literally just
Yeah, there was nothing special about him, but he was always there. Exactly.
literally it. Marcus, in terms of Man United right now, we've chatted
Yeah.
kind of in the last weeks kind of about us improving and needing to improve and adapting into kind of Ralph Rangnick's system. Now, the last couple of games we've drawn 1-1. Again, we've kind of both been great 40, 45-minute performances. For you, Marcus, when you look at United's kind of game against Burnley yesterday, kind of 24 hours after, kind of reflecting on it, what was your overall thoughts on, first of all, the performance, and then following that, the result, and kind of how that kind of affects our top four chances now?
I think you see the shape of United is growing. If you watch the first 45 minutes, I think it's one of the best performances I've seen from United for a long time. With intensity, with a clear idea, with fast attacks. If I only think about the left side with Sancho and with Shaw, they got behind the back 4 or 5 times. Shaw made incredible runs there. They had such a clear idea how they want to play. They play with such energy, and basically they should have scored 3 or 4 goals. That was the only thing that was really missing. We could talk about the referee taking some bad decisions or weak decisions. Yeah, maybe. But if you talk about the performances, the first 45 minutes, it was absolutely brilliant. What I cannot understand is that you get off the halftime break and they were nowhere. They were all over them. So and that is a thing that I don't understand, because playing 45 minutes in such a manner, it's absolutely amazing. But then 15 minutes after, to start from a complete different point with players with the likes of Varane and Pogba and all of them being on the pitch, it's crazy, because Burnley in the second half, they could have even scored 2 or 3 goals, and then they lose the game 2 or 3-1. And this is really, this cannot happen, with a club or with a size or with the players that were on the pitch. It's not acceptable, and you're not talking about tactics, and you're talking about intensity. You just talk about world-class players who didn't perform. and they were in control of the game the first 45 minutes. So that's something me as a coach, I would talk to them after the game, because it's not about tactics or anything. It's just about clear your intensity and your will to do your job, because the first 15 minutes after the break, it seemed like they were still in the changing room, and this is something that cannot happen in any first division in Europe in at any point.
Yeah, it seemed like, they almost fell asleep at half time. That's the way it was. They kind of sleptwalk into the second half, and it was just, again, we discussed it off air. Like, Burnley were winning every second ball. Weghorst up front.
Was second half, he was bullying them all over the show. He was keeping the ball. He was so strong. And if you see like players like Varane and Maguire, they are so strong and so tough, and they couldn't get the ball off him. And I'm asking myself, how is it possible? It's crazy.
Yeah, and it was like, see Harry Maguire. I was going to come to Dave's comment with regards to Maguire, because Dave, who works here with Talk the Devils, has said, guys, I read a quote on Twitter after last night's game. I think it hit the nail on the head. It said, Ralph coached a 4-0 last night, but Harry Maguire handed us a 1-1. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah. It's a little bit dramatic, It's a little bit dramatic from a supporter point of view. But I understand his point. Maguire is a guy who has a big price tag, and since he made his first step with United, you feel like it's too heavy for him. You feel like he has a backpack on his shoulders, and it's too heavy for him. And but there are also performances of him from the first 45 minutes where you think, this guy, he can do it. But then there are times where he's so sleepy and in German there's a word, lethargic, he falls into
lethargic,
yeah, and this basically describes it. And I don't know what you can do, but of a player with such a big value and big pedigree, it's not acceptable that you fall asleep and you're not up to your game for 15 or 20 minutes. Because they could have lost the whole game with just 20 minutes not being on their normal standards, and it's really disappointing because they drop points week in, week out because of that thing.
Yeah, and I think, like Marcus, in the last 12 months ago, Harry Maguire was probably one of our better players. He was playing very well last season. This season, since the European Championship final, he seems to really have fallen off, and he hasn't picked that back up at any point. Do you think with Maguire this season, is he scarred from that European final? Do you think, is this more of a mental thing than kind of a I suppose physical thing? Do you maybe think mentally he's kind of,
Could be. It's very difficult to say, but I think that this move of Varane is very clever, because having somebody beside him who's very strong, who's from the technical part of view much better than him, is really important for Maguire, because he's lacking that, and with Varane being also very strong on the dead balls, on the corner kicks, on the set pieces, that also gives Maguire a little bit more space to breathe, because everybody is picking on him. If the results aren't there, if it's right or not, in football it doesn't matter, because supporters, they have their own way of seeing the football game, and he needs to live up to the expectations, and he needs to get along with it. He seems to be very, very sensible with critics, which is for me quite surprising, because a player of his stature shouldn't be very, how should I say, scared about critics. It's a normal part of the game, And if you think that United played the first 45 minutes without Ronaldo yesterday, and they played in a great shape, I think with Jadon Sancho being on the left wing, and I think I didn't see him for the last 2-3 years playing like this, As last time
he was his best game for United by far.
It was with Dortmund, he played this way. So you feel that Rangnick has his influence on the players, and you also see that the players are understanding what he wants from them. But they are from the physical side of the game. They are not there for 90 minutes. They can just make it up to 45. To play in that intensity with that sharpness, with that speed and everything. But it will come. I think it will just take time. But also Pogba settled in well. I'm quite surprised with
Yeah, I was
his
going to
style
ask
of
you about that.
football.
You
So
spoke about your concerns
yeah,
about
yeah,
Pogba, but the last two games, he seems like he's taken well to Ralph's system and
yeah,
he's slotting in well
yeah.
in the 4-3-3. Do you maybe think in these next, let's say, 5 months that Ralph Rangnick can maybe get the best out of Paul Pogba?
I think so, because at the moment he looks quite strong physically. He looks also quite strong mentally. He doesn't lose the ball. He wants the ball. He's asking the ball a lot. He puts his mark on the game. So I think he was also yesterday. He was one of the better players. Bruno is lacking a little bit of sharpness, a little bit of creativity at the moment. But it's just a moment, a point. Maybe in 2-3 weeks we're talking the complete opposite, but as I said a few weeks ago, United playing with Bruno and with Ronaldo together, the style of Rangnick, it doesn't fit, and you saw that yesterday with Ronaldo not playing. It was a different football, and I think it gets closer and closer to what he wants to play.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I think with Bruno and Ronaldo, I think a lot of the time they run into the same type of space and they're both kind of confusing each other at times. And it seems like Bruno is almost better with a striker that kind of,
With
links up the
Cavani,
play.
who has a big work rate, who's working really hard
Yeah.
for the team, also against the ball, and with Ronaldo playing in that role and Bruno behind, you're playing with two men less. You cannot play that high counter pressing attack football. It's impossible.
When you look at Ralph's system, he's kind of integrated in these last kind of 3-4 weeks. It seems like the players are getting used to it. I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the physical aspect of it. I think a lot of them aren't used to this pressing, counter-pressing game. And that's obviously shown in the second half of games recently. We've been petering off kind of towards kind of the 60-minute mark in a game. When you look at this system, obviously Ralph has 5 more months to work with these players. Do you maybe think yourself, Marcus, that let's speak in a hypothetical situation, should Ralph get maybe 12 more months with these players and obviously bring some new players in the summer to maybe try adapt? Because I think a lot of United fans are saying at the moment that Ralph Rangnick, we can see his idea at the moment, but maybe he needs some of his own players to maybe adapt his system.
When a coach comes in, he cannot take immediately 10, 15 players in a transfer period. That's why you always say you always have to wait 2, not even 3 transfer periods until you see really the benchmark of a coach. If you see the real idea how he wants to play, because you cannot take every player in 1 or 2 months. Sometimes they are in long contracts, and you need time for that. But I think with Ralph Rangnick going one step back as a strategic person or agent or whatever, I think this is also very important, because he will find a coach who will live on his ideas and his approach of football. So therefore, it's not important if Ralph Rangnick is the head coach or if he's the agent or whatever, or sporting director, But the idea of how United will play in the next years or the next time, I think it's clear and for everybody in the club. And therefore, the main idea has already been set a few months ago. And I think they should keep on going that direction, because you see that United is playing a different kind of football, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, I think, look, it'll take time, but whether he stays as the head coach or he goes in as consultant and helps us recruit the new manager, I think it's very important that same principle does get kept and we do play kind of attacking football. Marcus, for you then, kind of just to kind of pose the question to you with that, let's say Ralph Rangnick is that consultant, he does pick that new manager. For you, who would be the best fit to continue that?
There are a lot of big names in the market, but Ralph Rangnick will know best, because he has a clear idea of where he wants to go, how he wants to play, and with what players he wants to play. And I think it will be not very difficult if you have a guy who has an idea. The biggest problem United had in the last 5 to 10 years, they never had like a big idea what they want to do. They always put it into a person. They put it into Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They put it into David Moyes. They put it into Mourinho. But they didn't have that strategic idea where they want to go. You know what I mean? And they always made it up to the person who's coming as a coach. But as a club, you should have a clear idea how you want to play. And therefore you have to find a coach who is going into that direction. But in the recent years, they just find a coach and he was telling them how he wanted to play, how they had to play, and every time they fired the coach, there was always basically they were pushing everything over and there was a new idea, So, and therefore I think now with Rangnick, it's a perfect solution with him being in control, choosing the coach, choosing players, and putting the things into the right directions also with the youth teams. I think you have a main idea. And if you have a main idea where everybody's talking about, you have a good perspective for the future.
Yeah, 100%. And look, for me, if Ralph does go upstairs, for me, I think someone who maybe to continue that same principle for me would probably be Erik ten Hag in terms of principle and the way he plays.
Yeah.
I think them two working together, as Ralph being a consultant, Ten Hag to a head coach, maybe do United go out of left field and maybe recruit Edwin van der Sar as part of that backroom team as well?
Maybe,
that would be fantastic. That's the dream, I suppose.
Yeah. That's a good. Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah? You never know. You should work for United.
Yeah, I wish. But for me, it's just looking the way Ten Hag works with Van der Sar at Ajax. I just look at
that. They do an amazing job over there.
Bring that to United, really,
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I'd absolutely love that. Reese also says here in the comments as well, smart recruitment must be further implemented. Absolutely.
Definitely. That's a good input, yeah.
And he also says Ten Hag would be a great shout or persist for Ralph for a while and then bring in Luis Enrique after the World Cup. Now, that would be Ralph Rangnick and Luis Enrique working together. Oof. That would be interesting.
Yeah, if Enrique can see himself in playing that football, because Enrique is also more into the Spanish tiki-taka possession kind of football, and Ralph Rangnick is more into vertical passes, finding quick solutions, getting up the field in 3 to 5 seconds. I think there are different approaches. I think there's a little bit of a problem between to it, but yeah, basically they both want to have the ball. I think if you read there, Tedesco is a good guy. Nagelsmann, he also would be perfect. So, but there are a lot of big names, as I said, who can fit to that style of Ralph Rangnick.
Yeah, and look, I think these next 4 or 5 months, we're going to see every manager in world football, bar Jurgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel, to Pep Guardiola. Every manager, bar the two of them, is going to be linked to the United job at some point in these 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. But I just say this: if Chelsea get unsettled and they sack Tuchel, bring that guy in.
Yeah.
I take Thomas Tuchel as well.
They worked together before, so you never know.
Never know. Let's see, we're firing out great ideas here, Marcus. We're speaking it into existence.
You should be in the boardroom, right?
Yeah, 100%. Fletcher, Murtaugh, Joe Woodward, Arnold, move away. Me and Marcus are taking over.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
But just finally, obviously, look, we have a big game against Southampton coming up Saturday, and Southampton just beat Spurs 3-2 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. How do you feel about that game on Saturday? Obviously, we spoke off air about their big set piece threat, and they're a very good team.
I feel good about it because when a team comes who has won a game before, they come with confidence. If a team who loses before 4-0, they come with a knife between their teeth. It's not easy to play against teams like this. And Southampton will come to win. That means they want to play. They want to also create something. I think that will be a good point for United, that they also can play their football again. And I think at home They have to win. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to the game Saturday. Nice early
Great.
12:30 kickoff.
Great.
I'm going for drinks with Phil, Lee, and Wayne before the night before the game. So hopefully, I'm not too hungover. So
Say
hopefully, Man
hello
United.
from me, yeah?
I will absolutely say hello. We will be chatting all things United all night, 100%. But finally, just on just one player, because obviously you've played in the academy and you've played obviously alongside a lot of young players. Anthony Elanga last Friday missed a penalty, and he was subject obviously a lot of online abuse and stuff like that. But in terms of his overall kind of mentality now going forward, do you think that penalty missed in that situation happening, in the Middlesbrough game on Friday, do you think that could actually make him as a professional and maybe kind of push him forward to kind of develop that bit more?
Yeah, he has to figure out, these things, they happen in football, in professional football, and he has to figure it out how it works, and he has to adapt to it, because these things, they will happen a lot in football. When you get criticism, you have to get along with it. You have to find a way for yourself to deal with it, and I think he will. I think he has a good surrounding, and I think he seems to be very strong mentally as well. So I think there's no doubt about him struggling in the near future.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I think he said it rightly. He has a great attitude, and I think for me, Ralph Rangnick has put a lot of trust into him in these last kind of
He's the perfect player
months.
for him, by the way. He loves these kind of players, young players who are very have a big responsibility. They have a good attitude. They're fast. They're strong. Rangnick loves these players. He always has, and he always will.
Yeah, and it's just his overall philosophy. Look, we're going to see how we get on with Ralph Rangnick over these next couple of weeks and months, and I dare to say we will have loads of conversations on how his tactics are working at the football club. And the Tactics podcast will be back next week, the day after the Brighton game. So we will have a lot to talk about that day. Ralph Rangnick against Graham Potter, two very good coaches. Graham Potter is a very good coach and doing fantastic with Brighton. So that will be a great conversation we will have next Wednesday on the podcast. But we're going to wrap it up there, guys. It's been an absolutely fantastic show here this evening. One thing I'd like just to mention just at the end of the podcast, Wayne has released a book on Wayne Rooney, The Teenage Kicks. Absolutely fantastic book. From the snippets I've been reading in the media, there's fantastic information about Wayne Rooney, Manchester United's greatest ever goal scorer. That is going to be for sale on Amazon soon, I believe. There's 8 days to the release, as Wayne did post on his Twitter page with the Rooney number 8 jersey. So if you want to check that book out, go across to Wayne's Twitter and check the link on Amazon. I do believe it's like £16-17, which is a fantastic price for one of Wayne's books, because his collection is absolutely fantastic. So do check that out. And also, guys, make sure to smash that like button on the video. Also subscribe to Talk the Devils. We will have another podcast tomorrow with Phil and Lee, where we will be looking ahead in depth to the Southampton game on Saturday. But until then, guys, thanks very much for watching, and also thanks very much again to Markus for coming on and joining us this evening here on Talk the Devils. But until then, guys, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.